What's up, gear mortals? Trey Xavier here. Today I want to talk to you about the ups and downs of multi-scale guitars. Multi-scale guitars, also known as fanned fret or sometimes V-fret guitars, are just guitars that have multiple scale lengths across the fretboard. The scale length, the length of the string, changes. In order to compensate, the frets are then fanned to keep the intonation consistent. For example, the guitar that I'm using today is this brand new Kiesel Type X multi-scale. This one is an 8-string and the scale length is 27.5 inches on the low string to 26 inches on the high string. The amp that I'm playing through is the Engel Savage 120 Mark II and it sounds like this. So you may have seen this and wondered, what's the deal? Why would anyone ever do that? And today I'm going to tell you what the advantages and challenges of the multi-scale guitar are. First of all, let's talk about the advantages. The number one advantage to having a multi-scale guitar is more ideal string tension. If you've ever opened up the lid of a piano and looked at the strings inside of it, you'll notice that the high notes have very short strings and the low notes have very long strings. And kind of the bigger the piano, generally the better it sounds, at least on the low end. And the reason for this is that in order to have a string at a certain pitch and make it playable, it has to have a certain amount of string tension. On string instruments, it's possible to have the same note on the open string at different string tensions and scale lengths. Lower notes will always require a longer scale length to have ideal string tension at pitch, and then higher notes will require a shorter scale length to have ideal string tension at pitch. If you've ever tried to tune down a Les Paul, which is a 24 3/4 inch scale, short scale guitar, then you've encountered this problem where the low strings become really floppy the lower you tune them. And you can compensate for this by upping the string gauge, but you can also compensate for it by using a longer scale length on those low strings. So for lower notes, for more ideal string tension, you want to have a longer scale length on your guitar. But what starts to happen as you lengthen the scale on your guitar is that the high strings start to get really tight and they start to feel stiff and sound kind of tinny and twangy. They're hard to bend, and they're really not that much fun to play in general. Hence the multi-scale guitar, because what we've done then is shrunk the scale length on the high strings so that they're easier to play and they sound better, but then the low notes are very long and have higher string tension, and that gives us a complete picture of string tension on the guitar. So the next advantage that leads to is that we can use much more ideal string gauges on our guitar, because if you have a shorter scale guitar, you can tune way down, but in order to compensate for that lost string tension, what you have to be doing is continually upping your string gauge. And that can be a problem in a number of ways. For example, you might not be able to get the gauge of string that you need easily. You might have to custom order them. You might have to modify your nut or the tuners to take a string of that gauge, and that's not fun for anybody. The next advantage is that thanks to more ideal string tension, the phenomenon that I like to call pitch wobble is far less present across the guitar. This is something that happens more often with low-tuned guitars, especially if you don't have very good string tension, where when you hit the note, it goes sharp and then kind of settles in, and that is something that irks me to no end. So having a multi-scale guitar greatly reduces that all the way across the fretboard, but especially on those low notes. What this also means is because the scale lengths are getting shorter as we go to the higher strings, that way the guitar is going to feel a lot more expressive and kind of bendy on those higher strings, which is going to make it a lot more fun to play solos and leads and that kind of thing. So basically, all of the advantages that we've talked about thus far add up to a much better feeling guitar from top to bottom. The next advantage is one that, of course, is going to be wide open for debate, but I think it looks really cool. If nothing else, it's interesting, it's unique, it's pretty distinct, and people take notice. I get tons of questions all the time about my multi-scale guitars and basses, even from people who don't play the guitar, so they're definitely eye-catching. The next upside is the ergonomic advantage of a multi-scale guitar. ergonomics are really, really important when it comes to playing a musical instrument, because if you play a lot like I do, you can develop serious problems if you're not really concerned with the ergonomics of your instrument. A multi-scale guitar, because of, like we were saying with the ideal string tension, can be a lot more ergonomic than your typical guitar. A lot of the difficulty of playing the guitar comes from the way that the strings feel. And if you're having a hard time bending strings and doing things that you want to do to express your art on the guitar, then over time, it's going to have a destructive effect on your body, especially your hands and wrists and elbows, shoulders, that kind of thing. So having ideal string tension is going to make that a lot easier, going to make it a lot easier for you to play the way that you want to without any compromises in that particular area. The final upside on my list is possibly the most delicious of the bunch, and that is that it pisses off boomers and blues lawyers to no end. Because this technology didn't exist when they were coming up, so therefore it must have no value at all, right?
Jimi Hendrix, greatest guitar player of all time, didn't need fancy multi-scale guitars to rock and roll. Did he? Damn spoiled millennials gotta have weird frets on your guitar. Why can't it just be regular frets?
Now I want to talk about the challenges of multi-scale. I don't really think of most of these as downsides as much as just things that you need to know if you're considering picking one of these up. The first one is just that it takes some time to get used to. If you've never played a fan fret guitar before, you're going to pick it up and hold it and just go, oh no, what's going on here? Depending on how big the difference is between the low string and the high string and how many strings are on the guitar itself, it can actually be pretty hard to play if you've never done it before. And then with some multi-scale guitars that have this huge extreme fan from the low string to the high string, a really large change in the scale length, no matter how good you are at the guitar or how comfortable you are with playing multi-scales, you might still not be able to play it very well. So mainly it's just important that you understand that there's going to be a little bit of an adjustment going from a straight scale to a multi-scale guitar if you've never played one before. And then also just to be really conscious of how much of a spread the fan is. For example, on the Type X 8-string here, we have a 27.5 to 26-inch scale change, which is a total change of 1.5 inches. That's not very much. So this is a very gentle fan, and of course, that number is spread out across 8 whole strings. If you had that same spread on a 6-string guitar, that's going to be a lot more extreme because it has less time to sort of gently slope across the fretboard. So that's definitely something you're going to want to keep in mind. The next challenge is sort of an option paralysis thing, and basically there's such a variety of different kinds of scale lengths and the different kinds of possibilities that you can have on different kinds of guitars that it's hard to know what's right and what's right for you. Really, it's a matter of experience, trying out different guitars of different scale lengths, having one for a little while and deciding that you either like it or you don't, and then stuff like availability of the kinds of strings that you're going to need for that scale length and all that kind of stuff. So I can't really give solid suggestions to people when they ask what's a good scale length, but I will say this. Sort of the most typical one that I see, and one that I've played a lot with great success, is a 7-string guitar that has a 27-inch scale on the low string and a 25.5-inch scale on the high string. That's definitely the most common one that I've seen out there. And then with the parallel fret, somewhere around the 9th fret. That's another thing that changes from guitar to guitar and from brand to brand, but that's a pretty great starting point. That works for me for everything from like drop A to A standard and G tuning, like a drop G or G standard tuning. You can get away with a lot in that sort of range. And then like for an 8-string guitar, 27.5 or 28 inches on the low string to 26. Basically that keeps you at a very small change from the low string to the high string, and that's something that you're really going to want to look out for. The next challenge that you are likely to encounter on a multi-scale guitar is having consistent palm muting. On a straight scale guitar, you can palm mute straight across and get the same effect on each string. On a multi-scale guitar, the break points of the string from where the string meets the saddle is different. It's in different places across the bridge. So we have to really be conscious of how we're moving our hand across the strings to get the same effect of palm muting on different strings. Of course, on the same string, you can get a bunch of different kinds of sounds with different palm muting placement. So for example, from more open to more tight, and then actually as you start to move up, the pitch kind of starts to creep up and has a completely different effect, a totally different sound, just within a very small area of the string. So when you're trying to get the exact same nice chunky palm muting sound, or whatever type of sound you're going for, all the way across the guitar, you have to be really conscious of how you're moving your palm. So for example, if I'm trying to get that same sound all the way across the strings, I have to make sure to move my hand with the bridge and not just straight across, because then we'll wind up with a bunch of different kinds of sounds. That time I went straight across the strings from sort of a tight palm mute on the 8th string to completely missing the string entirely and getting no palm mute out of the high E string. So you can see how it could go very wrong if you don't make any adjustments at all. Once again, not so much a downside as just something you really need to be aware of and you might have to make some adjustments for. Another challenge of multi-scale guitars is the limited pickup selection that's available to you as a multi-scale guitar player. There's just not that many manufacturers that will make custom slanted pickups for a multi-scale guitar. So if you want certain pickups in your guitar and you're real picky about it, you might not be able to get them for the kind of guitar that you have. That means your options are sticking with the pickups that came with the guitar or getting them custom made from a company like Bare Knuckle or Seymour Duncan and trying to find out the exact right specs, paying a lot extra, and even with all of that, it's not guaranteed that it's 100% for sure gonna fit. In that same vein, your options for tremolo systems on multi-scale guitars is also severely limited. There's a very small number of manufacturers who make multi-scale trems, and there's a pretty good reason for that. Once again, being that there's such a wide variety of types of multi-scale that you could have that it doesn't really make sense to put the money in to manufacture that many different kinds of tremolo systems with all these different kinds of spreads and everything. They would have to all look super different. So that might make it completely prohibitive for you to get a tremolo on the multi-scale guitar that you want. And now the final downside of multi-scale guitars is the fact that, in general, they're gonna cost a little bit more than a straight scale guitar of the same model. And the reason for that is just that it's a bit more involved in every area to manufacture a guitar like this, and setting it up and stuff like that is just a little bit more work, and getting specialized hardware for it, specialized pickups. Everything about it is just more specialized, so it makes sense that they would cost a little bit more. Now, if you've stuck with me up until this point, then you've already weighed the options in your mind. If you haven't actually tried a multi-scale guitar, I suggest that you sort of hold off judgment on the entire concept until you've actually held one in your hands and played it, because all of these things are either going to matter or not to you, and it's either gonna be worth it or it isn't. Personally, I think, especially with an 8-string guitar like the Type X here, multi-scale is almost a necessity. I think with a 6-string guitar, in general, you can definitely get away with never having it, and it might not make any difference at all. 7-string guitars, I have both really liked and kind of not loved multi-scale. I'm really digging it on this guitar. I think Definitely on an 8-string guitar, the benefits far outweigh any of the challenges. So especially if you're looking into getting an 8-string guitar, I definitely think that you should try out a multi-scale guitar first and foremost before you try any other scale lengths. No matter what, in the end, it's going to be up to you to decide whether or not going multi-scale is right for you. And it's going to depend on a lot of different kinds of factors that are personal and subjective and has to do with your playing style, the kind of music that you play, and a lot of other stuff that I can't decide for you. So I hope today that everything that I've laid out for you is going to help you to make an informed decision about whether or not multi-scale guitars are right for you. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Thanks to Kiesel Guitars for sponsoring this video and sending over this bonkers Type X 8-string multi-scale guitar. It's awesome. Plays great, sounds amazing, and obviously it looks pretty outrageous, which I like a lot. So if you haven't already, as always, mash that subscribe button, smack the bell, drop us a like, and leave a comment in the comments section. Let me know if you have ever tried a multi-scale guitar before, if you like it, if you own one, if you play one on the daily, or if you've never tried one and you think it's kind of weird. That's fine too, just let me know, and I'll see you guys real soon.